Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Nick at Stridewise.com, and today I'm taking a look at the signature boot from Taft, the very famous Jack boot. So Taft is a family-owned direct-to-consumer footwear brand that was founded in 2013 by Corey and Mallory Stevens. And in about 3 years, they bootstrapped themselves to some pretty considerable success. There was an article in Forbes in 2017 that put the company's value at $15 million. I don't know exactly how true that is, but they're definitely doing something right over at Taft. The boots are made in Europe with European leathers, or in this case with some European wool as well. And the boots are sold exclusively online, which means their products can be a bit cheaper than some of their competitors. And I have tried out their boots before. I reviewed their first Goodyear welted boot, the Dragon boot. You can check out my review right there. But this is their most famous boot. It's definitely better known than the Dragon boot. And this is pretty much synonymous with the brand now. So what makes it so fancy? So if you like me and you like boots and Google knows that you like boots and it's been tracking your search and browsing history, there's a good chance you've seen the Taft Jack boot a lot. Ever since I started getting into boots, Google is always advertising it at me. I'm always seeing it in my Instagram feed. And they're such distinctive boots that honestly, the first like 10 times I saw them, I didn't really care for them, but there's something compelling about its uniqueness. I just kept thinking about this very strange, interesting looking boot. After a while, I was like, you know, maybe with this outfit it could work, or with that outfit could work, with some blue khakis and a gray blazer, it'd be great. And I just kept fixating on these boots. So eventually I got this pair of boots, and I really like the look of them. They are very distinctive. The necessary flip side of that is that they don't go with quite as many outfits. They're not quite as versatile as a more boring boot. Whether or not that's a pro or a con for you really just kind of depends on your wardrobe and your temperament, your personality, and those sorts of things. But very interesting looking boot. This is Portuguese wool in the upper. This here is crust leather. There's something about this type of gray and this type of red that really go very, very well together. It is available in a few more boring color palettes. There's like a brown and gray one. But this one is definitely the most distinctive and the best known from the company. I had someone say that this looks like something the Great Gatsby would wear, and you know, I guess I can kind of see that. When you get to the sole, this is a Blake stitch, so it's very lightweight, it's very flexible, much more flexible than like a Goodyear welted boot, which has another layer between the upper and the sole. I'm not going to get into all that. I'll discuss the pros and cons later on in this video. Suffice to say, this particular Blake stitch boot, it's got a really soft sole on the bottom. It's got a decent amount of grip though, which is an upside. Very, very light, very svelte, very flexible, and it is fully lined with calfskin, so that makes it actually comfortable as well. There are downsides to the Blake stitch and to the soft sole, but the upsides, pretty comfortable. All right, so let's talk about this upper. This is natural raw wool from Portugal. Most of the Jack boots are in gray, but they do have a blue one, and they might have released more by the time you watch this. The leather on the toe cap and the counter is vegetable tanned crust leather. This is also just called vegetable crust leather. So crust leather is a leather that is dried after tanning, but it's not dyed and it hasn't undergone additional finishing. Some people see crust leather as like an intermediary stage in leather production, like it's sometimes considered semi-finished. I think they've just used crust leather here because Taft wanted to paint this themselves, and that is worth emphasizing. This is hand painted, which is a pretty cool touch. Also, the leather is chromium free, which is a lot better for the environment than chrome tanned leather, and it's a bit more expensive and time consuming. So while you're not getting a lot of leather here, the leather you do get is pretty nice, although I should mention it is pretty vulnerable to nicks and scrapes. So this leather, I don't know if dressy is the right word, but I wouldn't call it hardy, you know? Like when I get a new pair of boots, when I try and break them in, I don't deliberately try and damage them, but I don't coddle them. You know, I stomp around Brooklyn, I run for trains, I do everything that I would normally do in my day-to-day life. Within like a day and a half, 2 days of wearing these, I got some pretty ugly scratches on the toe cap here. So I sort of had to slow myself down a bit and say, you know, I'm not wearing Iron Rangers here. You have to be a little bit nicer to these boots than you would to these like really clunky, more workhorsey type of boots that you might be more used to wearing. Now, so when it comes to taking care of these, you don't want to go too hard on them. When you want to take care of this leather, you want to just use Kiwi's oxblood leather polish and cleaner kit. So that's from the company Kiwi. And when it comes to taking care of the wool, you can just use like an all-purpose upholstery cleaner and that'll do just fine. So those two recommendations come from Taft themselves. And I do want to take this opportunity to mention that they do have very good customer service. If you're on their website Anytime during the work week, there'll be a little chat feature there. You can just talk to someone there. I've spoken to Nadia like a million times there. She's very responsive. They also answer emails very easily. Corey himself is pretty much always on the Goodyear Welt subreddit. So anytime someone mentions Taft, he always chimes in. So that's a nice aspect of the company. They're pretty transparent and pretty responsive. Now, taking care of the boots, as far as long-term care goes, if you heard wool upper and Blake stitch sole, and there's a good chance that you might have thought this isn't going to do very well in wet or snowy weather. The truth is a little more complicated than that. Like, it is fully lined with calfskin, which helps a little bit, makes it not too terrible in the rain. They do describe the Blake stitch as water resistant, so you might have noticed I'm using words like not too terrible as opposed to saying it's really water resistant. When I spoke to Taft about that aspect of the shoe, the words they did use was that it's going to be fine in a light shower, but if it gets, quote, super wet, then the water can get through and, quote, affect the leather lining. So it's certainly not as water resistant as the Dragon boot, which I've reviewed before, which has an actual Goodyear welt and waterproof suede. But I don't want you to look at this boot, see the wool, and think it's going to be about as good in rain as like a wool sweater. It is a bit better than that. So in some of the other colors, this is available with a leather sole, but this one is a full rubber lug. And after the lug, there is also memory foam, a wood shank, another layer of leather, and cork. Now, I want to point out that nowhere on Taft's website do they mention the memory foam. Instead, I was told that it's there in an email from Taft. So, I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't mention it on the site if it were there. But in any case, this is a really comfortable, really flexible kind of shoe. The rubber lug is soft, 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 soft. It has a lot of give to it, as you can see. That's the upside of that soft rubber. The downside is that it doesn't feel super stable, which is kind of just how soles work most of the time. Not all of the time, but that's often the trade-off. You know, hard but stable, or soft but not so stable. It's not crazy durable either, as you can see. In the time I've had it, it's had a few nicks taken out of it, but again, it is comfortable and the grip is pretty decent as well. Now, this shoe is Blake stitch. The welt here is just decorative when compared to a Goodyear welt. Generally speaking, Blake stitch is sewn right into the sole instead of having a layer between the upper and the sole like a Goodyear welt. So the Blake stitch has fewer layers in the sole, and that results in a shoe that's flexible, it's dressier, it's a lot lighter, and it's definitely easy to wear in. The first time I wore these was at a wedding in Maine, and I can attest that they're very easy to dance in. The downside of the Blake stitch is that it's a little bit harder to resole, it's less water resistant, and it's just a little bit more delicate. Now, Taft emphasizes on their website that this is a resolable Blake stitch, so maybe they've made it easier to resole than some other Blake stitches, but I'd wager not as easy as a Goodyear welt. In any case, Taft's blog recommends that once the sole is wearing down, that you get rubber taps inserted, like just get some extra rubber placed on the bottom of the sole before you go to do a complete resole. That'll prolong the life of the shoe. So if you like these boots and you're wondering what size you are, I would recommend getting about a half size down from what you normally wear in sneakers. So like for me, I'm between an 11.5 and a 12 on a Brannock device. If a boot fits true to size, I'm pretty much always an 11.5, but most of my boots are a size 11. It is super common for boots to run a bit large, so I am an 11 in Red Wing and Wolverine and Thursday, and I'm an 11 in Taft as well. It fit me pretty well. It's a little bit narrow. Taft is pretty well known for having relatively narrow last. This is a D width, but I didn't find it uncomfortable. It was fine. I found this actually a bit more comfortable than the Dragon boot, possibly because it was just made with different materials. But yeah, relatively comfy. The good news is there's no break-in period with these at all. That's one of the upsides of having this nice, flexible Blake stitch sole. Also, it has this nice soft sole that I mentioned earlier. So the upside of that is that it is very comfy. Again, there's no break-in period. The grip is pretty good. But yeah, it doesn't feel super, super sturdy, and it also takes damage relatively easily. So that is just the flip side of that sole. Now, the main downside of this brand, though, is that right now, this could change at any time, at any moment, any day, but right now, this shoe is only available in the D width, and they also don't offer half sizes, so that could narrow the customer base, so to speak. Okay, so as far as the price goes, these boots are $250. That's what they cost on Taft's official website, and you are unlikely to find them anywhere else except on eBay. They don't really contract out their shoes to other stores to sell online, like Huckberry or something like that. Not right now, anyway. $250. So that is relatively inexpensive. Taft has some other boots online that are more expensive than these. These are a little bit cheaper than most of their boots, probably partly because it's so popular, partly because the upper has so much wool here, so they save a bit of money on leather. Now, it is a direct-to-consumer company, as I mentioned, so that helps to cut down on cost a bit. So $250, yeah, it's not the cheapest boot in the entire world, and for a direct-to-consumer brand, honestly, for something that's made mostly with wool, I would expect it to be a little bit cheaper. That said, they are made in Europe, or the leather is Europe, the wool is European, so you may find that price worth it. All right, so why should you get a pair of Jack boots? These boots are very, very eye-catching. I mean, they're not the most versatile boots in the world, which I'll discuss in the next section, but when you have put together an outfit that works well with these shoes, oof, I feel very good looking, I'm just gonna say it. I think when I'm wearing these shoes in an outfit that works with them, I feel fantastic. I get a lot of compliments on these shoes, which is like pretty unusual, but they're very, very distinctive, super eye-catching. When people like them, they love them. When they work well, they work very, very well, is what I'm trying to say here. Now, the comfort is also, I was very happy with the comfort. The sole feels quite a bit like a sneaker. The grip is pretty decent. It's nice and soft. It's fully leather lined. I didn't have any complaints with the comfort. I think these are a little bit more comfortable than the Dragon boot, in my personal opinion. Then there's the Blake stitch. As I mentioned, the Blake stitch is a bit of a mixed blessing, but the upsides are makes for a pretty pretty flexible shoe, that is. Pretty lightweight, it's pretty svelte. And it is true that it fits in better in formal situations when compared to like a Goodyear welt. It is harder to resole, but Taft does say they made this a resolable Blake stitch. I don't know, I haven't tried to resole them, and I haven't found any testimonies online of people that have tried to resole them, but the Blake stitch does have its upsides. Now, there are a few things I wasn't quite so crazy about with these boots. They are only available in one width and not in any half sizes, so that's going to put a lot of people out of the running for people who are wanting to try on these boots. Another thing, this pull tab here, this seems like a little thing, but it's really easy for the cuff of your pants to ride up here, so it looks a little bit like when a woman tucks her dress into her underwear. I'm not a big fan. You can tuck it in, but then you can feel it against the back of your leg. I'm not crazy about it. You can always just cut it off, I guess, but if you don't, honestly, I'm always kind of looking down at my feet when I'm walking in these to make sure that hasn't happened. Again, it seems like a little thing, but it is a persistent thing. Wet weather, this is better than a wool sweater in wet weather, but it is not completely waterproof. It's not all that water resistant. If it gets very, very wet, you can potentially do some damage to the lining actually, so that's something you need to keep in mind. Sole is very soft, makes it very comfortable, but it's not super sturdy, and again, it's pretty vulnerable to damage and nicks and things like that. Finally, the versatility. A lot of people call these very versatile boots. Personally, I just don't get it. I think when they work well, they work very, very well, as I've said a million times. But like, I think with plain outfits, they go pretty well. I think if you're a real fashionista, I see a lot of people wearing these in Brooklyn. I think you can go really well with more unusual outfits. If you're in between, I don't know. I mean, I think they go really well with nice khakis. They go really well with like nice dark blue jeans or black jeans. If you're wearing a button down and it's not too weird, I think it works well. But I think there are a lot of outfits that don't work well with. I really can't see someone wearing these in more casual situations, like with a t-shirt. I don't see them being worn with a suit. So yeah, again, if you are kind of like an average Joe, you might not be reaching for these quite as often as you might have been expecting. But again, when they work well, they do work very, very well. Okay, so those are my thoughts on the Jack boot from Taft. I really want to emphasize that everything I said before about versatility and fashion is obviously completely subjective. I'm a bit of a boring dresser myself, and I still quite like wearing these boots. I couldn't wear them with a t-shirt, but if you can, more power to you. Let me know in the comments below how you like to wear these boots. Make sure you subscribe, and if you want to see the full written review, just Google Stridewise and Taft Jack review.